That wish you'd never made, by Po_Tato2. Chapter 2. The truth can be a funny thing. A boy with engines in his calves and glasses on his face, engine mutation, speed, enhanced leg muscles, and lung capacity, chops his hand in the air as he speaks, which Izuku distantly thinks is almost a hazard. UA's entrance exam is as crowded as Izuku expected it to be, and more. And it's filled with annoying characters that make Izuku's eyes twitch as they get too close to him. His documents and forged ID are accepted without hesitation, and Izuku walks to the examination room where the written exam is being held. He notes every hidden camera he passes. Despite the fact that all the information on both the mandatory papers he'd filled in and the ID he'd made for himself is all true, it remains that none of his information will be able to be verified in any way, shape, or form, and Izuku is positive that before the physical examination is over, the principal will have caught this. He has a plan for this, of course, a very simple plan, one so simple in fact many would call it stupid. But that's for after the robots. The written exam doesn't take Izuku long, and he pretends to meditate while peering at the different quirks that pass around him as he waits in the hallway outside an auditorium. Eventually, the other kids arrive, and they're treated to a pointless presentation by Present Mic, vocal cord and lung mutation, volume and pitch alteration, voice, including an interruption by the same hand chop kid from earlier. After a glance at the card he was given, Izuku is loaded onto a bus, which he can't help but roll his eyes at. They're waved off by Ectoplasm, or one of his clones, Izuku instantly assumes, and then a group of roughly 20 teenagers is left standing around in front of a giant entrance to a fake city they can't see much of. What a waste of funds. Present Mic screams that the exam has begun, and the words are barely out of his mouth before Izuku's taken off, darting forward through the bodies of other kids while the rest of them blink in confusion. "What are you waiting for?" Izuku hears Present Mic distantly scream, but he's already holding out a hand, palms splayed open, eyes focused on the 2-pointer in front of him. He crunches his fingers into a fist, and the metal robot in front of him copies the motion, crumpling in on itself, metal screeching against metal. The end result is a crushed ball of robot as tall as Izuku's chest. He leaves it, already looking for his next target. He has 10 minutes, and he needs at least 40 points, at least, from what he's gathered. Izuku keeps moving. It takes him 5 minutes before he knows he's gotten at least 40 points, and after he slows his pace, happy to only crush a robot if it's about to hurt another examinee. He actually yanks an entire kid out of the way of a falling piece of concrete, because a kid's quirk allows him to turn his body to steel, using the same metal manipulation he's been using for the entire exam. He earns a shouted, "Thanks!" for the trouble. In no time, the 0-pointer robot is released, and Izuku is lucky enough to be directly in its path almost immediately. Kids run, screaming past him. There's no reason to show off and tire himself out, Izuku knows, and he's turning to head back to the entrance as well when he hears a girl scream. Spinning back around, Izuku immediately sees the problem. There's a girl he remembers seeing earlier who's now trapped under a huge piece of rubble from one of the buildings, directly in the 0-pointer's path. Sighing to himself, Izuku starts walking towards her. The ground is shaking from the force of the robot's steps, and Izuku wants to roll his eyes at the waste of resources and money. Typical. Izuku holds out a hand, looking at the 0-pointer, and he repeats the crushing motion he'd made on the earlier robots. Although it's not nearly as effortless as it was before, it's still easy, and it only takes him a few seconds to force the metal into a compact ball that has no chance of going anywhere. "Are you hurt?" Izuku asks the girl as he stops next to her. She gapes at him for a moment before managing to pull herself together. I think I twisted my ankle when I fell." Nodding, Izuku reaches down to grab at the giant piece of concrete that's clearly the main thing trapping her. "I'm going to lift this. Do you think you can get yourself out?" She nods, still looking shell-shocked, and Izuku distantly hopes she doesn't have a concussion too. He does exactly what he said without wasting time, gritting his teeth a little but still pushing the concrete up with remarkably less effort than should be required. The girl pushes herself to her feet and hobbles on one foot out of range so Izuku can lower the debris again. On cue, an old lady scuttles towards them with speed, almost immediately appearing at the girl's side. Satisfied that the girl will be taken care of, Izuku slips away. He centers in and focuses on the different intentions he can feel, and follows the direction of faint curiosity and hostility grouped together. He knows that if the principal somehow hadn't managed to notice him before, he certainly had his attention after what he did to the 0-pointer, and there's no point in waiting for them to seek him out. He'll save everyone some time by just going to them. A scruffy man Izuku immediately recognizes as Eraserhead suddenly steps out of a random hallway directly in front of him. His face is as unreadable as Izuku's, and neither of them say a word as Izuku turns to walk down the hallway Eraserhead just came from. The presence of Eraserhead continues to follow Izuku the rest of the way as he navigates his way towards the room he can tell the principal is sitting in. The sense of curiosity and intrigue is so strong it almost makes Izuku wrinkle his nose, despite the fact that intents have no smell. Soundlessly, the door opens as Izuku approaches it, and the hero Izuku knows as Nezu steps out, snapping the door shut on the cacophony of sounds coming from the room behind him. Black eyes which hold intelligence that far surpasses Izuku's stare at him, and the principal of UA tilts his head. "Please follow me, Shigaraki-kun." Nezu turns around and starts to walk, and Izuku follows obediently. "I believe we have much to discuss." Eraserhead follows him with nearly no indication of his presence, and Izuku is impressed because, without his intent quirk, he'd have a much harder time keeping track of where the man is. It takes Izuku only a moment to realize they must be heading to Nezu's office, and he cuts his eyes around as they walk, taking in more details of the world-famous UA High School. Shota doesn't take his eyes off the boy he's following. The kid is so normal that it makes Shota's eyes want to slide off of him, at least until he forces himself to focus. Then, finding himself able to notice all the things about him that are not normal. He's rather short and skinny enough to be just short of worrying. Curly white hair sits in a tangled heap on his head, and both his hair and body look like they need a good washing. Shigaraki, if that's really the kid's name, is covered in dirt and the kind of grit that comes from living rough. A few green freckles stand out on the boy's almost freakishly pale face, and Shota is just glad he isn't looking at him anymore, because the look in the kid's giant green eyes had been just short of poisonous. His shoulders are set straight back, yet they stay tense and ready for action. Shota can't read anything in the kid's motions. Not fear, not joy, not sadness, disgust, nervousness, anything. The kid is nothing like a kid, and it makes something primal in Shota want to run. They enter Nezu's office, and there is a pause as Nezu settles himself behind his desk, and Shigaraki sits in the chair that the principal gestures to. Shota recently sits as well, when Nezu tilts his head at him. "Would you care to explain the application you submitted?" Nezu starts, and Shota knows he's leaving it open-ended to see what Shigaraki thinks they're talking about. Nothing moves on the kid's face. "What part did you need explained, Nezu-san?" "Why don't you start from the beginning?" Nezu says with a smile, and Shota sighs to himself. "My name is Shigaraki Izuku," Shigaraki says, and Shota wonders if he's blinked at all this entire time. "Well, Shigaraki-kun, there appears to be a slight problem," Nezu says, folding his paws over each other. "Because I'm afraid you don't exist in any government databases." Shigaraki nods a single time. "Yes, that would be because my father never reported me to the Japanese government." "Why?" Nezu's ear tilts forward in intrigue, and Shota slouches further in his chair without taking his eyes off Shigaraki. All of a sudden, a dry smile slips off the kid's face, and it almost makes Shota want to shiver. "Surely you've guessed by now, Nezu-san. After all, I put my quirk right there on the paper for you." One way or another, Shota just knows this is going to end terribly. "The villain all for one is your father," Nezu says, and Shigaraki's hands twitch. Shota furrows his brow. He feels like he's heard that name somewhere, but... Villain? Yes. There is something cold in Shigaraki's eyes. "And you inherited his quirk?" "Yes." "And you want to be a hero?" "Yes." No hesitation, no pause, no doubt. The unspoken question of why hangs in the air. After a moment, Shigaraki leans forward slightly, eyes trained on Nezu. "I'm sure you know what my father has done, the things he's capable of. Think of that man, and then think of a child who was born soft and sweet and loving." Shota watches with a sort of sickness in his gut as Nezu's lips pinch together. "A supervillain," Shigaraki continues, something angry in the lines of his body. "Has no use for a child with tears in his eyes, but all for one believes himself to value his family, so he would never get rid of that child. He would fix them instead. There is a silent sorrow in the room as Shota and Nezu watch Shigaraki spread out his hands and stare at his palms. I know you're wondering why I'm here, whether or not to believe me, if I'm even fit to be a hero at all after the upbringing I've no doubt had. Shigaraki places his hands back down on his thighs and looks back up, mask once again in place, eyes blank and years older than they should be. I'm here for 2 reasons. First of all, to even your odds, and secondly because despite everything I've lived through, I never quite stopped wanting to be someone who could save someone like me. And as touching as the second part of Shigaraki's statement is, and as much as Shota can tell he means it, that is not the part he nor Nezu focuses on. To even our odds? Nezu asks. Shigaraki raises an eyebrow, and Shota can't help but notice how it feels like every one of his actions is artificially crafted. Don't tell me you actually think he's dead. A heavy chill runs down Shota's spine, and he notices the almost imperceptible way some of the hair on the back of Nezu's neck stands up. I had my suspicions, Nezu carefully says. Shigaraki snorts. All Might is an idiot for assuming something like that. He's arrogant. Shota forces himself to speak up. What happened? Sharp green eyes cut over to him, considering. Whatever the kid is looking for, he must find it, because he answers. 6 years ago, All Might and All for One had the greatest battle of both their lives, and it brought both of them to the brink of death. After a collision from both of them, where All Might smashed in my father's head, and my father tore a hole through All Might's torso, a building collapsed. The casual way Shigaraki describes the potent acts of violence by and against his own dad is disturbing, but from the little he's learned, Shota guesses there's no love lost between father and son. All Might was in critical condition, and he assumed the damage he had caused to All for One was so great that no man could survive it, healing quirks or not. Later he learned All for One's body was never found amongst the wreckage, but this didn't change his assumption. Unmoved, Shigaraki stares at Shota. That's what makes him a fool at best, and suicidal at worst. Shigaraki says, and Shota wishes he could disagree. So, Shigaraki looks back over to Nezu. What I mean by even the odds is that it is obvious to both me and my father that All Might is weakened, and if I can think of ways to exploit it, then I assure you my father can think of 100 more. Shigaraki's eyes seem to glow. Unlike All Might, All for One has spent the last 6 years healing and consolidating power as best he can. I am one of the weapons he was building, and I am one of, if not the only person who can stand head-to-head with All Might, or to All for One. I would never be so arrogant as you to say you need me, Shigaraki says, but I'll go so far as to say that I can reduce potential casualties, hero and civilian, by at least 50%. And by casualties, Shigaraki adds, green eyes cutting briefly to Shota like he knows. I do not mean injuries, I mean death. Shota doesn't know where the kid is getting these numbers, and there's plenty of things far more important he doesn't know either, but the feeling in his gut that every hero has learned to trust is telling him yes. Shota makes eye contact with Nezu, and he can't tell what his boss is thinking, but he does give him the tiniest, most imperceptible nod. The kid has his vote of confidence, which isn't easy to get. Based on the shine that enters Nezu's eyes, that makes up his mind. On the first day, do come see me after classes so that we can wrap up a few final things, please, Shigaraki-kun. But for now, welcome to your Hero Academia. Nezu smiles at Shigaraki unsettlingly as he hands him an envelope. When did he prepare that? And Shota somehow isn't surprised to see Shigaraki return a mirror version of the same grin right back at Nezu. Thank you very much, Nezu-san. Shigaraki stands up and bows shallowly, and turns and does the same to Shota. Eraserhead-san? Without another word, Shigaraki turns around and walks right out of Nezu's office, envelope clutched tightly in hand.